Hi everyone. For those that are new to the channel, I love you. Thank you very much for following me. And for those that have been following on, I want to give an update, maybe a recap of the last 9 weeks and what I've learned building 20 apps in 20 weeks with ChatGPT and a friend, and also a pivot that I'm taking based on what I've learned, what I think I've proved, and what I want to do next. If you've been following along, you know that over the last 9 weeks, I have built and released 9 apps, and I've used ChatGPT to code. I'm not a coder by any stretch of the imagination. I do work as a technical product manager, but I'm not a coder. The goal of the 20 apps in 20 weeks was to prove that anyone can, if you have an idea, a little bit of time and effort, and a modicum of technical skills, you can use ChatGPT to code and release a fully functioning, minimum viable product very easily. And some background to why I wanted to prove this is I'm one of those people, and I hope you are too, who think I have some great ideas every now and again. But I've either needed to find some money to hire some developers, or I needed to learn how to code it myself. I never learned to code, and I didn't have money. And I think a lot of people are in that situation, but they do have a great idea. I always had a dream of having a big development agency with a room full of developers where I could come in, show the plan of what I want to build, and we could just build it. And now with ChatGPT releasing over the last 18 to 20 months, and now don't need that. Literally don't need that. Can, in a weekend, build an entire product. I think the last 9 apps have proved that it is possible. Now let me tell you what I've kind of learned along the way. When I have released these products into the wild, and the only marketing I've ever done is put it on Product Hunt, done a post on my LinkedIn, done a post on Reddit, and Twitter, and that's basically it. So it's not like I've been pushing out these products far and wide. I have also been making a video on YouTube, which you guys have been watching. There's 2 major learnings based on the actual development and the feedback. Let's talk about the development first. So traditionally, when you build software, you go through these steps: ideation, then UI, and then you start to code front end, then you code back end, or a variation of that. Now, in this situation where it's a single function, I just want to solve this one problem, I have basically done away with any design step completely, and it's straight to code. But the reason I've done that is because of the tools that are available. I'll give you an example of how I'm doing that a little bit later in the video. What I found is the key step when using AI as your developer, it is down to user stories, and that's it. The better you plan your user stories, the faster you can actually get something output and coded. Because the AI can fill in the gaps a lot on UI, especially when you've used these tools that will code UI for you, but it's the user stories that you give it that get the output that make it really easy. So I'll show you the tools I used to come up with the user stories and then the steps I did. But it's really down to, you have to know what is the output and then what are the stories? What are the steps that people take? What's the screen they see? What do they do on each step and on the page to get them to the output that you want? And this kind of reliance on the stories, the journey, describing the journey, is, I think, the way that development will go. That I won't need to, and people will not need to actually write the code that delivers that output or that function. That will be unnecessary. But they will have to be able to describe it better. And I think the new coding language will be user story creation. The second part has really been about paring down the amount of functionality that you think your MVP needs. And this, for me, has been a hard one. I've always sort of overscoped projects. But when you think about, I want my users to be able to X, what are all the things that they need to be able to do to deliver that? And the key word is need. What do they need to be able to deliver that? Not what do you want it to be, but what do they need? So an example would be in the Collectify app I built, which I think was like 5 or 6. And it was, they need to be able to create an account. They need to be able to create a listing which had a name and a photo. They need to be able to make some settings, and they need to be able to do some basic organization on the page. Those are the needs, right? When I was building, I spent time trying to organize, to give the user the ability to drag and drop. On the left in the sidebar, there's all of their collections. And I was like, all right, they should be able to reorganize and drag and drop. And the problem was, should is not a need. I spent a couple of hours buggerizing around trying to make a drag and drop work. Now that wouldn't have stopped someone from creating the collection. It wouldn't have stopped someone from doing what they needed to do to get to the output of creating a collection of images and information that I can keep, store, and share. That was the need. And I think that is a good example of when you're using AI or you're building an MVP, keep going back and going, is this a need for this output or is it a should? They should be able to, but if they can't, does that stop them from getting to the endpoint? If it doesn't, then forget about it. That's a nice to have. And I know it's a fairly basic example. It's that kind of lesson that has been reinforced to me when this project about really redefining how you put an MVP together. Now, the second camp really comes from the feedback from the people who have been seeing what I'm doing and following along, like yourself, or other people who just sort of casually make a comment on Reddit. And what I found is there's two camps. There's the people who are kind of intrigued, very much like myself, have an idea, but they don't know where to start. It's great. Oh, you're doing this, cool, but how do I even start? Where do I go? What do I do? What's the very first step? And then the second is primarily developers. And the common theme is, why are you building 20 things in 20 weeks? Just focus on one thing. Or it's shitty quality code. It's a shitty piece of thing. It doesn't do anything. It's basically junk. You're just taking up space. Oh, and the biggest one I get is, that's fine for a short thing, but AI can never code anything of big value. It can't code a big product. And it's that part which I'm going to address, and I'm going to pivot the whole structure of the challenge. So I'm moving from me, a friend, and ChatGPT are building 20 apps in 20 weeks to me, a friend, and ChatGPT are building 10 features in 10 weeks. And before I get into that, I want to readdress something I said a little bit earlier. And that is, as developers, as AI developers, we focus on user stories and not code. And I say that because the way that the tooling is going, and it is happening incredibly fast, is that it doesn't matter about the code that I'm writing, whether it's secure or not. Because in the background, the tooling is now at a point where it can automatically write code, then write a test for that code, then run the test, then assess its security, rewrite the code, and have a functioning piece of code, which is essentially what developers do. They write code, they write a test, they test that it works, and then they move on. So then when they write another function, they make sure that everything runs. So when they deploy that function, it doesn't break something else because it has a test to make sure it works. So the tooling is getting to a point now where it can automatically write tests that run and then just on the fly rewrite the code so it will continue passing the test and not break any other test. I'm being very high level with that. And of course, we're still not quite there. And we're not quite there with code base volume. You know, some of these code bases are massive, but it is what is happening. It is how development is going. And no matter how many developers don't like it, we are at the industrial age of code. You do not do it by hand, like you don't weave by hand anymore. You have a machine that does the hard work. You just have to know the instructions to give it. And it is the future. So now let's talk about Datatruck. So Datatruck was the 6th or 7th app that we released. And it was about creating a tool that allowed you to have a contact form on a website, then using AI, route that contact form contents, read it, prioritize it, understand it, add some tags, summarize, and then select from a list of emails who to forward that one contact form to. That was the essential part of it. It was a form forwarding with a little bit of smart routing inside. That was the concept. But we believe that there's more that we can do here, and that's what we're going to do. Let's walk through the vision of Datatruck. The idea is that we break down the concept into 3 sections. We have the source right now, which is a contact form, which is sent by JSON. That then goes to the sorting. And then once it's sort of sorted, it will then go to its destination. And that is basically the process now, right? But let's imagine we want to do something a little bit more interesting, which is what we want to do. Oh, by the way, this tool I'm using right now, this is QuickMap, the most recent app, if you're watching this in the next few days. So I want to do a couple of things. First, I want to add more sources. I want to add email, And I also want to add hosted forms. So the HTML form is one that you would build in the sorting area, copy the code and place it in. And then the hosted form essentially is a form you'll create, and it gives you a URL that you can either share the URL with your contact with the form, or you can iframe that form into a website. So those are the three sources that I want to build. But over time, I want to change a few things. I want to be able to add an image to a form. I want to be able to make a payment. I want to be able to add a voice note. I want to be able to create these forms, but I want to have additional information that I can send. Now, when we get to the sorting, these are the things I want to do. First off, I'm recreating the way that the sorting currently works. I'll give you an example of what it is now, and then show you the steps I'm taking to rebuild it. And this is more of a stepped process that makes it easier to build and select and do some types, bits and pieces. In this, you'll create your route name. From the source to the sorting to the destination is called a route in our thing. So you create your route name, you select the source type or create the source type, then you would configure that source type, then you select the destination and you save. But configuration though will take a few steps. So I want to be able to, when I configure what to do, so let's say I've got a form and it's sent into my sorting area via the route, and I want to do something to that data. So I might want to enrich this data, meaning I want to call an API that will add additional information to that data before it does something. I want to, let's say, format the information. I want to read the image data. I want whatever. Let's talk about enriching. So enriching means an API, and this API is a number of those that I'll build in. I'll figure out what I want to do with them. But in this case, let's say I want to, perfect example, one of the apps I was going to build was going to be a food tracking service. Now I can just take a photo, submit it, and get a basic, what's in here and some basic information, but it's not quite good enough. I want to use an API to get actual real information from a service that tells me things like the actual calories. So it's a lot more based in fact, a database. So I want to connect it to a database is a better way of saying. So that's one thing it will do. But my kind of goal at the moment is to use LLMs, which is large language models, as a function where for instance, formatting data. I don't want to write the code to format the data every single time because there are inherently always going to be edge cases. There's always going to be things that happen that you will either break or you have to write, if this, then that, or if this, then that, or if this, then that, or if this, then that. And then when you want to change something, you have to go back and do the code, right? And I think that is something we can fix. We kind of have now in Datatruck LLM as a function, because when you send a contact form and you've added the email addresses on your destination, it uses the LLM as a function where it will read the input and then dynamically select the correct email to add to that destination. So it's already adding as a function, but we're going to build that out a lot more. And then we have our destinations. So currently destination is just email, but I want to add a table so you could store information, and I want to add JSON. So you won't want to send it to another tool. So you're using us as a kind of a formatting thing that then gets sent. This is now what we're going to build. There's more than 10 features in here, but this is roughly what we want to build. Let me show you what we have today. So when you log into Datatruck right now, you have the routes. I'm going to call this video. Okay, what it gives you right now is a URL that you would send your content to. You add the destination. For instance, if I have a contact form on businessdaddy.org site, I send it, and then I can set the emails and so on and so forth. I will give you a quick example. I'm just using SendHub demo, boop, and we'll call this name, message, save sender. Okay. Now I'm just going to use SendHub as a form, and I am going to go message there I want, and then send. And as you can see, this is what you have. Now, if I send it to an email, it would then read the information and send it to. If I have additional emails, if this is a careers email, hi, I want a job, I could have a careers email address. If it's a sales, inquiry, customer service, you get the idea. That is Datatruck. But based on what we were talking about before, this particular instance will not work for that. Let me show you the steps I'm taking now to completely rebuild what we're doing. So the first thing I'm doing is, of course, writing my user stories. And then I'm going to a tool called V0. V0 is free, but you get a limited number of messages that you can send and receive. Now, what I did is, I don't know if it will show me the snippet. So I wrote out the user stories. I used ChatGPT to help me. I just used the chat and I talked through what are the steps I want someone to make. I built that design and went, okay, from here they need to do this, and then they need to do this and this and this. And then I said, right, write me story, user journeys. I copied that and I put it into V0. And this is what it gave me, which essentially is the code. And then I sort of iterate through, I want it to actually do this. So I need to select the root source after I name it. And then it tells me what it did. And I say, when I select the form, so I'm sort of looking at what I wanted it to do and then saying, oh, actually, when it does this or this, I want it to do this. When it does this, I want it to do this. And you'll be able to see it start to come together to a point that makes sense. So you can see we now have essentially a flow of creating the information that I wanted, right? And that's it. I've told it it's outputting what I want. But what I found is it's putting all of this code into one thing. There's a lot there. It's too much. And that, when you're using AI, is bad. You need to make sure that all of your functions, all of the little bits, all of the steps, small, while it can output safely around 200 to 250 lines of code in one go, it can be very problematic. And you need to be very careful about what you're doing, but it can output about 250, 300 lines of code relatively. I'm confident that I'll get what I want from that. When it gets longer, that's where you enter a whole lot of problems. So I basically told it to reconfigure everything. Oh, I did this on my mobile, by the way. I did this on mobile. I wasn't at a computer. I just typed it out. And I said, reconfigure what I want, refactor it, breaking it down into the different steps that I wanted. Still has the functions I need. Next, so on and so forth. But it broke it down into a way I need it. And then this is a next step, which I'm not doing in this iteration. We will do later. But it was creating a destination manager. And this is a good example of, in my destination manager, this is a feature that I need to build. It's not going to happen in the next week. So I need to pair it back to what other must or needs to have so I can get this out. Not what it should. It doesn't need destination manager yet. Doesn't get put into this week's feature. What I've then been doing is getting this code and then explaining to ChatGPT, okay, this is what we need to do. When I start the chat, here is what we're doing. Here is all of the information you need. I copy paste code that we have. I then tell it I want to build these files. I want to do these components, so on and so forth. So I'm copying in, here's information. Let me show you the chat. So when I start the chat, now remember, we are now building a feature on top of an existing product, which you need to do a little bit more groundwork when starting the new chat. And you do have to start new chats semi-regularly because it just starts to get dumb. So be aware. So I tell it what we're doing. I then give it the existing code for that specific, starting with a single element. And then what we're doing, and I've copied, as you can see, I'm just copying and pasting the code from V0 into, I want to do this, and then I want it to do this and this. And then more information, like this is the first step, as you can see, quite long. But I want you to be aware that this first chat, I don't know if it shows, but this first chat, I used O1 Preview. Now, the reason I use O1 Preview is it is better at planning. It is better at understanding a large amount of information at the start, and you're going to get a better output. As you can see, it works out. It's stepping through what it needs to do based on your requirements, the code that's there, and the output you're wanting. And then it gives me the code, gives me what I need, copy, paste, create the things, and so on. So when I put this in, I then got errors. Okay. Now I'm like, oh, I don't have the UI card and the tabs card. But based on what you've just done, give me the code for that. Write it for me. I was using 4.0 at this point, and you'll see where I change. Here it is, and I've got problems. Copy paste. Just use your error, use the information it gives you. This doesn't work. Copy paste. It keeps talking you through. Oh, there's an error. There's still an error. It's jumping around all over the place. Still an error. Yep, still getting an error. And at this point, I switch to, and I should have done this earlier, but what I find is sometimes you go around in a circle. It says, here's an error, gives you the code to fix it. It gives you an error. Okay, here's the new error, gives you code to fix it. It goes back to the first error. When you're going in a circle, switch it to 01, give it the information, and you'll find generally solves it in one go. I should have done that earlier, but it's absolutely like you want to switch between its reasoning functionality, because there are a limited number of searches you can do, and 4.0. 4.0 is just better at getting code out. 01 is better when you've got this recursing error that just keeps happening and sort of figuring it out. So switch between them all the time. It keeps everything in its memory. It doesn't forget stuff, but it just helps when it's like, I have a problem. I need you to actually think about what's going on rather than I just need you to output this function. And that's really how the best you get. So as you can see, back and forth, let me show you where we're up to now. So we have our route, we have the steps, and it's basically sort of at this working through it process. So I've been working at this now for maybe 2 or 3 hours, I think. And I've taken it from that step where it was to this with errors after making the designs in a few hours. So there's still a bit of work to do, but I have an entire week. I still need to bring in functions that already existed, so there's still some work to do, but at least you can sort of see the process. You understand what I'm building, and I'm hoping that sort of this new journey, this new stage is somehow interesting enough for you to follow along. If you like this or if you have questions, please feel free to comments, DMs, message, whatever. If you want to look at the other projects I've built, go to businessdaddy.org. You'll see all of the other projects and things. Some of them are free, some of them are paid. The only reason I've got paid versions is because if there's actually a cost to running it, I'm not made of money. I don't have funding. Like, it needs to cover its cost. And, the free ones, they do have a donation if you want. And I also, in making this video, I used 2 of the other products I built, which was the Send Hub, which was the form that could send to an endpoint, which I will probably roll that tool into Datatruck as a part of Datatruck. I also use Quick Map to show you the workflow as well. So that's it. That's the update. I hope you don't feel I have, by pivoting, have gone off this challenge and I'm not delivering. I think it's still a valid challenge. It's still a large amount of coding that's happened, but there's an added level of complexity now to this. And it's also proving the end step that you can, with AI, not only just build a single page tool or a free Chrome extension, but you can actually build something that has complexity and larger functionality. So again, like, subscribe, share this with your friends, watch it 150,000 times, post it to everywhere you can. Cheers.